Officer Pelt with the Roseville Police Department. I'm just calling because I believe you have a patient in your office by the name of Patricia Bennett.
Nope, she's not here. They might have got the date mixed up. Her appointment is February the 13th. I know, it's the 14th today.
She's in there.
She's in the house.
Oh, she's in there.
Well, hold on.
I don't know. I'm not just.
What happens when a grandmother stops answering calls, but her phone keeps texting like nothing's wrong? Who's on the other end of those messages when no one can get her on speaker? If the family swears she's at a medical appointment today, why does a 10-second call to the clinic say she isn't on the schedule at all? And in a house where one voice at the door says, "Know what changes," when another voice from inside says, "Yes." This is where the Bennett case begins. Hello everyone, welcome back. That thin seam between a no and a yes is where truth tends to slip in. What does truth look like in a house that insists everything's fine? It looks ordinary. A backyard that says nothing. Cars that say nothing. A hallway that smells like detergent. The household has said Patricia Bennett is fine, just sleeping, just recovering, just out for a B12 shot, just at cardiology, just elsewhere. If she can text reassurance, why can't anyone put her on the line right now? If today is a medical day, why does a clinic calendar say otherwise in a flat 10 seconds? If she just stopped by for clothes, why does the request to call her on speaker keep getting postponed? These aren't trick questions. They're basic ones, the kind that ought to have basic answers. So the case organizes itself around three hard, practical questions. Where is Patricia Bennett truly physically now? Not by text, in person. Who is actually holding her phone and typing like her when no one can get her to speak? Why did the same-day appointment vanish the instant a receptionist checked the real calendar? Why does a voice tighten only when an officer asks, "Can you call her now?" Roseville, California, United States is famous for its winding green trails along Dry Creek where sunlight filters through leafy canopies and birdsong softly blends with the gentle sound of flowing water. But that serene beauty was suddenly shaken. In late January 2020, John, a worried grandson, couldn't reach his grandmother Patricia Bennett and requested a welfare check. When police arrived, the door was opened by Patricia's daughter, Carol Ray. Inside the house was Ricky Carroll's live-in boyfriend. The first answer at the threshold is no. Carol doesn't consent to a search. But the second answer, Ricky's, matters just as much in law as it does in life. He shares the home. He has authority over the shared areas. He says yes. And that single consent opens the places both people use: hallways, the backyard, and eventually the room America reserves for everything it doesn't want to see: the garage. Before we get there, fix the rest of the timeline in your head. Around Halloween into Thanksgiving, relatives last saw Patricia in person. On January 12th, a text from Patricia's phone says she's sleeping and getting over pneumonia, but no one can get her voice on a call. On January 21st, 22, officers knock more than once. Each time the story relocates, she's with a sister she just stopped by. She's at a clinic for a B12 shot or a cardiology visit. The details sound reasonable. The records will soon disagree. Now back to the house. With lawful consent, the search moves in a simple arc backyard. Nothing unusual. Cars, nothing obvious. Interior ordinary in the way ordinary homes are. And then the garage, cold concrete, old paint cans, a loop of extension cord. In the corner, a large plastic tote waits. The way, clutter waits. Quiet square designed to be ignored.
Towels and it stinks like a dead body.
Are you kidding me?
Swear to God.
The lid gives the air changes and the radio voice stays clinical. Strong odor, towels saturated. I can see a body. In one breath, a welfare check becomes a homicide investigation. When officers discovered what was inside the plastic tote in the garage, they immediately re-entered the house and took Carol into custody. Investigators believed Carol was responsible for her mother's death. The lingering question was Ricky, her live-in boyfriend. Did he know what was going on, or had he helped her? So keep the questions out front, exactly as we started. Where is Patricia Bennett truly? Who is speaking for her? Why does a quiet calendar beat a loud alibi? If the answers are innocent, they'll hold fast. If they're not, The yes at the door and the truth inside the garage will pry them loose. I'll put it plainly, if it were me, the moment my gut flickered, I'd verify. In life and death stakes, a text can't stand in for a voice and a story can't stand in for a record. One boring 10-second phone call can knock down an hour of reassurance. In this house, it did. Weeks earlier, people had seen Patricia in the ordinary ways families do, a doorstep. Hello, a ride here or there, small errands. Then the sightings thinned to memories, and memories blurred into, I think it was before the holidays. What replaced them were messages, brief soothing lines that said she was sleeping, that she was getting over pneumonia, that she'd catch up later. They didn't land wrong at first. Plenty of older folks prefer to text. But something about the phrasing sat crooked with the people who knew her best. The phone rang and rang. No answer. The voicemails felt like pebbles thrown at a closed window. Worry, like a good detective, doesn't give up easily. A grandson kept pushing. He turned worry into action and asked for help. Officers went once, then again. Each time they arrived, a new version of the same day awaited them. She's at her sister's place. She just stopped by to grab clothes. She's out for a B12 shot. She's at a heart appointment. None of those are unreasonable on their own. It's the pattern that betrays them, different answers to the same question delivered in the precise window when a direct call to Patricia kept failing. The officer's request was simple and humane. Let's call her together. Put it on speaker. That's the moment most stories, true stories, settle down. You hit dial. A tired, slightly annoyed voice answers, "What is going on?" Relief walks into the room, but relief didn't show up here. Instead, there were delays, a hunt for a charger, a suggestion that she'd just stepped out, a soft promise to try later. Then came the detail that tightened everything. Messages from Patricia's phone tended to arrive right after the uniforms left the driveway. The timing felt choreographed. It was as if the phone were being used not to communicate, but to buy time, to keep her present enough to deflect concern, but absent enough to avoid a single decisive proof of life. Pressure builds in those small refusals. The longer there's no voice, the more the silence starts acting like evidence. Every day without a call becomes a thin layer on a stack. Eventually, the stack becomes heavy enough to tip. And when the stack tips, it doesn't tip toward speculation. It tips toward verification. So the focus shifted from persuasion to proof. Not, she told me, but the system shows. Not she went there, but they saw her. The pressure wasn't about catching anyone in a lie for sport. It was about ending the uncertainty with something solid. A person heard. A person seen. A person scheduled somewhere you can point to and say, there. For the people who loved Patricia, it wasn't drama they craved. It was an ordinary sound, her voice, even if irritated, even if brief. That sound never came. And in its absence, the natural next step asserted itself. If a voice won't appear, find the places where facts do. Clinics, calendars, relatives, anyone or anything that could either ratify the story or quietly deny it. I'll be blunt, prolonged silence scares me more than bad news. Silence feeds the story that wants to live. Verification starves it. In this case, the silence had gone on long enough. The first branch was the softest. She's at her sister's. It's the most comforting kind of answer, families taking care of families. But when relatives were contacted, the comfort curdled. The sister hadn't seen Patricia in years. Not weeks, not months, years. That didn't just fail to support the statement, it pushed directly against it. The branch snapped off with a single question. So the story shifted to medicine, which always sounds reasonable. She's at a clinic. She's been getting B12 shots. She's seeing a heart doctor. Illness is persuasive. It buys sympathy and time. But medicine also keeps records, and records don't care about sympathy. An officer called this cardiology office the name had pointed to. The answer was calm, polite, and devastating to the day's script. There was no appointment for Patricia Bennett that day. None. There was, however, a legitimate appointment on the calendar 3 weeks later on the 13th of February. 10 seconds. That's all it took for the scaffolding to shiver. When medical fiction fails, it often tries to relocate rather than surrender. The story nudged around the corner to a second facility, a cancer center behind the hospital. Another call. Another pause. Another gentle no. The door that should have opened didn't even have hinges. The third branch tried to anchor itself in familiarity. She just stopped by to pick up clothes and meds yesterday. That picture is easy to believe because it's built out of ordinary life. We all know someone who swings by to grab the small things that keep a routine intact. But ordinary life has a way of leaving prints. If she'd been in the house hours earlier, surely someone could make a quick call now right here in front of officers to settle the matter. Again came the request. Would you dial her and put it on speaker? Again? The hesitation, the console of excuses. She's resting her phone is dead. She'll call back soon. The prints weren't there. What tied these branches together wasn't their content, but their behavior. Each one, when touched, produced a contradiction. The aunt's house said no. The clinic said no. They left only the places that hadn't yet spoken inside the home itself. Secondary facility said no, and the simplest, most human form of confirmation, a living voice, stayed missing. Meanwhile, Patricia's phone found the energy to text after cruisers pulled away. Here's what I've learned watching cases like this: liars love props. A doctor's name, a vitamin shot, a back building behind a hospital. The ornamentation gives the listener something to hold on to, something that feels real in the moment. But every prop is also an invitation. If you hand a careful person a proper noun, you've handed them a lever. They will pull it. And if the lever isn't attached to anything, the whole contraption falls. So the officers kept pulling levers. They weren't rude. They were methodical. If she's at her sister's, what's the number? If she's at cardiology, let's call. If it's B12, which clinic handles it? If she just left here at 5 yesterday, why can't we hear her right now? Every question was a path to yes. The story kept choosing no. By now, the grandson's unease had a shape. It wasn't simply that he missed his grandmother. It was that he'd been conversing with a ghost, a digital version of her, with perfect timing and no voice. He knew the way she typed, the way she punctuated the words she overused and the ones she avoided. These messages didn't sound like her. Family members often can't explain that instinct to strangers, but they don't have to. All they have to do is persist long enough for an objective system to corroborate what their bones already know. And the objective systems did corroborate. The appointment wasn't that day. The relative hadn't seen her. The second facility didn't have a record. The house, despite its insistence that everything was fine, could not produce a living voice on command. Layer by layer, the branches were trimmed back until the tree looked wrong. There was too much story and too little proof. I think this is where denial usually makes its last stand. Pile on more detail. Invent a ride, a driver a quick errand. Promise a call later. People believe what they want to believe for a little while longer, especially when the alternative is unthinkable. But denial is terrible at geography. It forgets the rooms it hasn't accounted for. It forgets that homes have shared spaces with shared rights attached to them. And it forgets that when one person says no, another person who shares the space may lawfully say yes. In the end, every thread of the narrative pointed away from words and toward places with calendars, desks, and people who log things. Those places had spoken. They had, in their own dry way, told officers she wasn't here today. Which, if the sister's house was a no, and the clinics were a no, and the phone wouldn't yield a voice, the next answer wouldn't come from a conversation at all. It would come from a room. And of all the rooms that tell the truth, the garage is the most merciless. It doesn't care about family trees or sympathetic backstories. It cares about what you put in it and whether you thought anyone would ever look. The tote in that garage would provide the first undeniable answer. But the questions had already done most of the work. The house tried to hold its line. The person who called it home said officers could not come in, and that should have been the end of it, except that the law recognizes something most families understand. Intuitively, shared space is shared play. Another resident of the home gave permission to search the common areas, and that wasn't a loophole, it was the rule. A welfare check doesn't die at a closed door. If someone with equal authority to use that door says, "You can look." So they did what professionals do when emotion is thick and facts are thin. They wrote the permission down, read it back, and started with the least intrusive places first. The backyard said nothing. No disturbed soil, no chaotic footprints. Nothing but winter-dulled grass and a fence line that had watched better days. The vehicles were next registration insurance, a quick look for the kinds of things that don't belong in glove compartments. Clean. The route through the house unfolded like a map. 1,000 cops have walked family room to kitchen, to laundry alcove, the lived-in smells of detergent and stale coffee curtains that remembered being opened in a hurry. All roads converge somewhere, and in American houses, they tend to converge in the garage. It's the room where a life's overflow gets stacked, taped, labeled, and forgotten. The concrete clung to cold. A coil of extension cord hung beside a rake. Against the far wall, a large plastic tote sat exactly the way totes always sit, square, ordinary, designed to be ignored. Only this one wouldn't be ignored. The lid lifted with the slightest squeak. The towels underneath were the wrong color for a cleaning job, a wrongness the nose understood before the eye did. The odor was immediate and convincing, the kind that insists on attention. There was moisture clinging where moisture shouldn't be. Not puddled, not dripping, but present in a way that suggested time measured in weeks rather than many months. And there in the geometry of fabric was the unmistakable outline that turned a rumor into a fact. You don't need gore to grasp the gravity. The tote spoke without words. Something terrible had happened, and it had been hidden here. That single discovery flipped the badge on the investigation. This was no longer a push and pull over whether a grandmother preferred texting to talking. The officers didn't need to announce it. The house felt the temperature drop. Questions that had been met with soft shrugs and borrowed names became formal, documented, precise. Who last saw Patricia alive? Who last heard her voice? Who had access to her phone? Who said she was at this clinic on this day? What time exactly? If you charted the evening, you could draw the moment the case turned. It wasn't the discovery of the tote alone. It was the route to the tote that mattered. Consent from a co-occupant. A methodical progression from outside to in, from open spaces to common ones. When people later asked, how did they even get in there? The answer wasn't complicated or cinematic. It was a sentence. He said they could search the shared areas. That sentence cut through hours of choreographed uncertainty. It also set the stage for the questions that followed, the kind whose answers would either calm the room or show it what it already suspected. Because once the tote existed, every prior denial took on a different tone. She's out getting a shot. She just stopped by. She's resting. Those lines belong to a different world, the one that existed before the lid came off. I think a lot about the balance between privacy and safety. We all deserve a locked door. But when a life might be on the line, shared space and shared permission can be the thin, essential bridge to the truth. In this case, that one consent didn't just open a garage, it kept the case from suffocating in polite uncertainty. The path from consent to tote did something else too. It shortened the timeline. That faint, unwelcome dampness in a place that should have been dry told investigators they weren't looking at a relic from long ago. It suggested a body concealed for weeks, not days, not a year. That matters in homicide work. The closer the act, the fewer the places the truth could have wandered. Phones still hold records, calendars still have entries, neighbors still remember sounds, and the person whose story changes most often is suddenly standing very close to the last moment anything could have changed it all. By night's end, the questions were no longer about whether Patricia Bennett was okay. They were about how she had died, when, and who had orchestrated the fiction that kept her digitally alive while her voice went missing. There was one person who could explain all of it. She would try. They brought her in without spectacle, a quiet ride, a quiet booking, a quiet room with a table scarred by 1,000 similar conversations. She looked small at first, then guarded, then rehearsed. An investigator asked for her version of events, not the texts, not the appointments, not the secondhand reports, but the moment itself. She said there had been a noise in the night, something sharp out of place, the kind that prompts anyone who feels responsible for a house to get up and look. She said she grabbed a handgun, she named the make, the way gun owners always do, and stepped into the dark to check the rooms. The story bent on a single movement. She tripped, the weapon discharged. The shot struck her mother, who was sleeping on the couch. She said the sound after the sound was silence. She said panic did the rest. Panic is the most human defense there is. It's also the hardest to interrogate without sounding cruel. Still, the questions had to be asked because the tote in the garage had already made them necessary. Why didn't you call 911? Even if you were terrified, even if you were in shock? Why wasn't the next action the universal one, phone in hand, 3 digits, help on the way? She said she froze, that she didn't think anyone would believe her. She said she was ashamed. How did you move her? The house wasn't a warehouse. The hallway wasn't wide. She described towels, a blanket leverage. She said it took time. She said she did it alone. The investigator didn't contradict her. He let the image sit in the air heavy enough to examine itself. Why all the messages, why the clinic names and the appointments and the texts sent after patrol cars left? If this was a tragic accidental shot, why was the aftermath a months-long performance? She shrugged at that at first, then tried a different road. She hadn't meant to deceive anyone, she said. She had hoped to figure things out to tell the right person at the right time. The words were vague. The impact of them was not. Figuring things out had required a dead woman's phone to keep talking. Even so, the investigators didn't slam the door on her story. Not yet. They did what good interviewers do. They asked for details that could be checked. Where were you standing when you tripped? What did you trip over? Which hand held the gun? How far was your mother from you? Which cushion was she lying on? Was there a second shot? She said, "No one shot, one horrible mistake. The gun was a Ruger. She was right-handed. She was in the doorway to the living room. Her mother's head was toward the arm of the couch." Those specifics are the scaffolding of an accident narrative. They can be measured against bullet paths, residue patterns, angles. They can be wrong or right, but at least they can be tested. And for a few hours, that testing horizon gave her story a sliver of daylight. If the physical evidence could be made to match, if the ballistics could say, yes, this is possible exactly as told, then the case would still be monstrous. There was still a body and a tote, but the legal questions would shift from intent to aftermath. The trouble wasn't only the tote, it was the duration, the weeks of artificial aliveness, the suddenly busy phone belonging to a woman nobody could get on the line. The interview closed with courtesy. "We'll be back to talk about this," the investigator said. She nodded as if she understood what this entailed: measurements, timelines, forensic reports. She might have hoped that the word accident would still cover her when morning came. If it's truly an accident, the behavior after the fact leans toward rescue, not camouflage. You might hide for an hour. You might lie to one person once. You don't construct a weeks-long multi-clinic alibi and text from a phone that should be silent. Panic explains a moment. It rarely explains a campaign. Mourning is the enemy of bad stories. It brings reports. The second interview began with one. The investigator set a folder on the table and opened it like a polite letter. He summarized first, as if offering her a way to absorb the shape before the point. In addition to the gunshot, the medical examiner had documented multiple recent stab wounds. Fresh, deep, not the kind you inherit from a surgery years ago, not the kind you mistake for anything else. The word multiple is a quiet hammer in a room like that. Her face went still in the way faces do when the mind races too fast to animate it. The investigator didn't lunge. He gave her the same option he'd given the day before: explain what happened. She said she didn't know what he meant. The report meant exactly what it said. More than one wound, penetrating, new, absent from every explanation she'd offered. Stories die when they can no longer carry their own weight. "I tripped and the gun went off" is a story that has to be solitary. It requires a single catastrophe, one unrepeatable wrong step. Stab wounds don't live in that story. They live in a different story, one about intention, or at least about action taken after the shot that is incompatible with rescue. They also reshape time. A stray bullet is instantaneous. Stabbing is sequential. You cannot accidentally do it again and again. The investigator asked the only honest question left. What is the gunshot in this sequence, a cause or a cover? If the shot happened first, the knives came later. If the knives came first, the shot helped make noise for neighbors to misremember. Either way, the accident had become a mask. She didn't rework her account. She didn't add a second person to the room. She stayed with the things she'd already said, as if repetition could make physics kinder. But the physics had left the building. Forensics doesn't care about shame. It traces angles and edges. It notes residue where residue should be, and the absence of it where it shouldn't be. It measures. And the measurements were pointing away from a stumble in the dark and toward a deliberate staged aftermath, at best a homicidal sequence at worst. I've heard people ask why the presence of stabbing changes so much. It's because multiplicity matters. When two different kinds of harm are present, the law stops seeing accident and starts seeing choices made over minutes, not milliseconds. Choices that lead not to 911, but to towels and plastic lids. In human terms, it's the difference between "I had no time" and "I took time." From where I sit, multi-mechanism injuries almost never belong to the category of oops. They belong to the family of decisions. You can call the first one panic if you must. It's much harder to call the second or the third anything but intent, or at minimum, a will to hide what cannot be undone. The deeper investigators went into Ricky's alibi, the clearer it became that he had little to gain from the situation. He was not the one sending texts from Patricia's phone or managing the messages that portrayed everything as normal. Ricky's role in the story seemed passive rather than active. He hadn't orchestrated any of the events surrounding Patricia's disappearance. Ricky's lack of direct involvement became a key reason he was cleared by the authorities. His statements were consistent with the evidence, and there was no physical or circumstantial evidence linking him directly to Patricia's death. His willingness to cooperate, particularly in granting access to the shared spaces of the house, helped authorities narrow their focus and shift attention back to Carol. The investigation ultimately revealed that Carol had been manipulating the situation using Patricia's phone to send texts to family members pretending that everything was fine while her mother's body was hidden in the garage. Ricky's role, while significant in understanding the household dynamics, wasn't central to the crime itself. His testimony primarily helped investigators understand what had been happening inside the home, but it did not directly implicate him in the crime. Ricky's involvement, while not malicious, had been passive. He was an unwitting participant in the manipulation that Carol had orchestrated. Ultimately, Ricky's role became less about suspicion and more about understanding how Carol's actions had manipulated the situation. His cooperation with the police and his lack of direct culpability helped the authorities focus on Carol as the prime suspect. Ricky's testimony was instrumental in moving the investigation forward, but as time went on, it was clear that the real criminal mastermind was Carol, not Ricky. Ricky had been a passive bystander in a situation that spiraled out of control, but the investigation ultimately cleared him of any involvement in Patricia's death. John Ray, Patricia's grandson, never stopped searching. While Carol was trying to maintain control over the narrative, John never stopped looking for his grandmother. From the first moment Patricia stopped answering his calls, he could sense that something wasn't right. The first day passed without incident, but as days turned into weeks, John's gut feeling grew stronger. He didn't buy the explanations given by Carol or Ricky. The text messages that kept coming from Patricia's phone were cold and impersonal, not the voice of someone who was supposedly recovering from an illness. John's suspicions were fueled by the simple, unsettling feeling that Patricia would never stop talking to him if she were alive. She had always been there, always available for a chat, even if just to check in. When she disappeared without a trace, he knew something was wrong. His relentless pursuit wasn't just about finding his grandmother. It was about confirming that her life mattered, that she wasn't simply forgotten in the shuffle of family dynamics. John's determination to seek out the truth despite family resistance ultimately led to the breakthrough in the case. His actions were motivated by a deep love and respect for Patricia, who in his eyes was more than just a family member. He was someone who had always been there for him. John's insistence in checking every story became crucial to the case. It was through his efforts that Carol's lies were uncovered, and his constant questioning pushed police to look deeper into Patricia's phone records, clinic schedules, and the family's interactions. In a case where Carol had tried to silence Patricia's voice, John kept her alive through his dedication. He refused to let his grandmother become just another forgotten person, just another statistic. The case centered around Carol's motives: financial stress, personal control, and the desire to maintain a semblance of normalcy despite the darkness surrounding her actions. The prosecution outlined how Carol had used Patricia's phone to maintain a facade of life-texting family and friends, as though nothing had changed when in reality her mother was dead in the garage. The evidence showed that Carol had gone to great lengths to manipulate both her family and law enforcement. It was clear that she had used Patricia's medical situation as a cover, crafting stories about appointments that didn't exist and creating a web of lies to keep suspicion at bay. The defense, on the other hand, tried to paint a picture of a woman overwhelmed by the stress of caregiving and the weight of financial responsibility. They claimed that the shooting had been an accident, a tragedy that had spiraled out of control. They argued that Carol had panicked and didn't know how to deal with the aftermath. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury found Carol guilty of murder. The judge handed down a life sentence without parole. The verdict sent a message: justice would not be swayed by the emotions or the manipulation of family ties. In the end, this case serves as a powerful reminder of how financial struggles and personal control can blur the line between care and manipulation. The ability to control someone's life physically and financially can be a dangerous thing, especially when those boundaries are violated by a loved one. For John Ray, this was more than just a criminal case. It was a personal journey to make sure that his grandmother's life meant more than just a collection of texts and a pile of bills. It was about showing that the truth matters no matter how deeply it's buried. For the rest of us, the lesson is simple. Don't ignore the red flags. If something doesn't feel right, ask questions. Verify the details no matter how uncomfortable it might be. And when the silence grows louder than the truth, don't let it become an accomplice. Don't let silence become an accomplice. If you found this case fascinating and eye-opening, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime stories like this. Stay tuned for more shocking cases, and always remember the truth is out there. It's just waiting to be uncovered.